So this is something I mentioned very briefly in one of my first videos. In fact, it's my most popular video. Over 85,000 people have seen it, but I bet most of them didn't catch this. Everything's a dungeon. So my brain has been stewing on these design ideas for the last few days because I've been reading Justin Alexander's So You Want to Be a GM, a fantastic book. And I've also been listening to RuneHammer's RPG MAINFRAME podcast. Those two things are really making me think more and more about how I design games and how can I be really efficient in teaching you how to design games. And that reminded me of an old blog post by Scott Ream, the Angry GM. And I went looking for that so I could reference it in this video and found a new article by David Barker, and that gave me the title of this video. All of those things combined to bring me to this idea that everything's a dungeon. For example, here's a dungeon that I quickly threw together to illustrate my point. The shape of this dungeon is kind of unique, but the reason I shaped it this way is so you can see how it translates into something other than a dungeon. So let's take a look at a Baldur's Gate map. And you can see this dungeon translates to the same pattern as the city of Baldur's Gate. This gives you an idea of how you can translate the concept of a dungeon to something that's not actually an indoor confined space. But from a game design standpoint, you're still thinking about this as a series of contained encounters. So it's not going room to room and these encounters are associated with particular rooms, but you're going from space to space and these spaces are associated with certain encounters. So conceptually, you treat the spaces as if they were rooms. So those rooms can translate to sections of a small town or to districts of a large city or regions of a wilderness map. And to help conceptualize that, I'm going to take this Baldur's Gate map and add nodes to the map. And you can see there's 22 different locations in Baldur's Gate, different neighborhoods and districts. And what we're going to do is put a node in each of those districts. And there are 4 significant gates to the city, and I'm going to add those as well with these blue nodes. And then all I'm going to do is connect the dots. And these create pathways to the nodes. So again, conceptually, you're treating these nodes like dungeon rooms and the connectors like dungeon hallways. So here's a quick example of how you would lay out a dungeon room with a few bullet points. The dining hall has an extremely large table and surrounded by 12 high-backed chairs. A goblin sits at the table smoking a pipe. Another goblin is dealing cards. Across the room, you hear, "They're a matched set," as you see a hobgoblin holding a scimitar arguing with a bugbear holding the scimitar. On the floor is a chest that's awkwardly spilled open. And I can do the same thing with one of my city neighborhoods. Here's the Sea Tower neighborhood from Baldur's Gate described with the exact same number of bullet points. There's Sea Tower Prison with a couple of NPCs that run the prison. There's the Mighty Manticore Tavern with an NPC barkeep and a group of boisterous soldiers who are spending their paychecks. And in the smithing district, you have 3 of the best smiths in town. One who crafts medium armor, one who crafts heavy armor, and one who crafts martial weapons. So with that exact same number of bullet points, I've actually laid out one of my neighborhood nodes on my city map. But let me back up for a second. Why do we use dungeons? It's because they're a confined space, and it makes it very easy to conceptualize a series of encounters and where those encounters can be located. It also makes it easier as a game designer to translate the idea that I have when I make an adventure and then you read that adventure, because it's easier to see, okay, the bugbear is in this room, the goblins are in that room, and the wizard is in these other rooms over here. And this design language helps us convey an adventure from one person to the other in a way that's much easier to translate. The other advantage of a confined space of a dungeon is it helps us limit our players' options, because as a dungeon master, you're constantly trying to outthink 4 or 5 people. Your players outnumber you. They're going to come up with creative and out-of-the-box ideas that are going to challenge the way you think about the dungeon. And that's a good thing. That's what makes the game fun, is when players can be creative and challenge the game experience. But too many dungeon masters get overwhelmed by that or get offended by that, worst of all. However, you should celebrate that. When your players think outside the box and try to do something unique, you should celebrate that and embrace that, because that's the fun part of this game. But what you need to do is set yourself up for success by having a solid concept of the parameters and boundaries of the adventure so that you are prepared for when the players go off the rails. So let's say the characters are in the neighborhood of Norchapel and they want to climb Duskhawk Hill. You might have an NPC describe that climbing Duskhawk Hill is not legal because the Dusthawks are an endangered species and people aren't allowed to go up on the hill. This would be a way to clearly denote to the player characters that they are going off the path. They're going outside of the expected parameters. But if they do it anyway, that's when you would roll a random encounter. So let's say you rolled a wilderness random encounter, since the hill is not inside the city, and you rolled a pack of wolves. Now, wolves might be a little too much to be this close to the city, so you could always reflavor those wolves as a pack of hungry wild dogs. But either way, you've given them an encounter because of their choice. They've chosen to divert from the node map, and that results in a random encounter. So let's say the characters are in Rivington and the players want to go directly to the city without crossing the bridge and going through all the neighborhoods. They want to take a shortcut across the river, so they try to hire a boat. You could have the fishermen tell them that that's not accepted, that everybody has to go through the gate. However, if they're persuasive enough and probably bribe the fisherman, he can sneak them across the river into the Brantham neighborhood. So in this case, you're creating a role-play encounter that the players engage in order to not follow the node map. This is not a way to punish players for going off the map. It's a way for you to conceptualize your design space and divide it into two major categories. The nodes, which are expected encounters, things that you are planning for, things that you think the players are going to do, things that will drive the story forward. Those are all your nodes. And then the second category is random encounters, and they are there to illustrate how this world works. And they're also useful, like I said, to drive the players back toward the expected parts of the adventure. So this way, you don't have to plan for every potential thing the players can do, but you have a plan for what you are going to do, regardless of where the players go and what the players do. So this is how you can level up as a game master. Take a skill that you already have, something you're already good at, dungeon design, and apply it to something bigger, something larger. And I'm not suggesting you jump straight from designing dungeons to a big city like Baldur's Gate, but I wanted to illustrate the point that you can tackle something even as large as a big city with this design concept. You take a skill that you're already familiar with and you start to stretch its design principles wider and wider into newer and larger areas of game design. And I say this because every game master is a game designer, and I want to free you and encourage you that you already have a skill set, and you can take that skill set and apply it and build it to newer and greater things. So everything's a dungeon. And I encourage you to use this and see how it expands the way you think about game design. Likewise, if you want to see more about Baldur's Gate and how I would bring that to the Dungeons & Dragons tabletop, let me know in the comments below. Plus, don't forget to like and subscribe, and especially hit that notification bell, because you want to know when next week's video launches, because that's where we explore the idea that everything is a sandbox. And if you want more great RPG content, make sure you subscribe. If you've already subscribed, double check and make sure you hit that notification bell. Click either of the links on your screen to watch more Dire Dan right now. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.